My name is Florence Wilson, and I'm 68 years old. I never thought my only daughter would look me in the eyes and say those words that shattered my heart. Don't touch my baby, you are disgusting. After 40 years as a pediatric nurse, after sacrificing everything to raise her alone after her father died, after all the love I poured into her life, that moment changed everything between us. 1 week later, I called my lawyer and removed Amanda from my will. It wasn't about revenge, it was the first time I truly valued myself. Before we dive into this painful journey, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit subscribe and like if my story resonates with you. Family estrangement is more common than many realize, and your support helps others feel less alone in their struggles. I was born and raised in a comfortable middle-class family in Boston. My parents worked hard to provide for me and my two siblings, instilling in us the values of education, compassion, and family loyalty. Those values guided me toward a career in pediatric nursing where I spent over 40 years caring for countless children with dedication and love. During nursing school, I met Frank Wilson, the kindest, most patient man I'd ever known. His gentle humor and unwavering support made him the perfect partner for me. We married shortly after graduation and settled into a modest but happy life in a Boston suburb. Frank worked as a hospital administrator while I pursued my nursing career. We always dreamed of having a big family, but life had other plans. For years, we struggled with fertility issues. The monthly disappointments, the invasive treatments, the emotional roller coaster, it all took a tremendous toll on us both. After 7 years of trying, we had almost given up hope when I finally became pregnant with Amanda. She was our miracle baby, and from the moment I held her in my arms, I knew I would do anything for her. Frank was the most devoted father imaginable. He would read to Amanda every night, take her to the park on weekends, and save part of his lunch to share with her when he got home. Those were golden years, filled with simple family moments, holiday gatherings, summer picnics, weekend trips to visit my parents. Amanda was the center of our universe, perhaps too much so. Looking back, we might have spoiled her, but our love was so overwhelming after waiting so long for her. Then tragedy struck when Amanda was 16. Frank had a sudden heart attack at work. I still remember getting that phone call, rushing to the hospital where I had helped so many families through crisis, only to find myself unable to save my own husband. Frank was gone just like that. My rock, my partner, the love of my life. Amanda took her father's death hard. She had been Daddy's little girl, and losing him during her already tumultuous teenage years sent her into a spiral of grief that manifested as rebellion. Suddenly, my sweet, bright daughter was skipping school, hanging out with a troubling crowd, and lashing out at me constantly. I did everything I could to help her through her grief while managing my own. I arranged counseling, tried to maintain routines, worked extra shifts to ensure her college fund remained intact despite the loss of Frank's income. Many nights I cried myself to sleep, exhausted from working full-time while single-parenting a grieving, angry teenager. During this difficult time, my grandmother Beatrice became my anchor. She had been widowed young herself and understood the unique challenges I faced. Every Sunday we would have tea together, and she would listen as I poured out my worries about Amanda. "Florence," she would say, "just keep showing up with love. The seeds you plant now may not bloom for years, but they will eventually flower." Grandmother Beatrice had been my own safe haven during childhood. When my parents were busy working, she would take me in, teaching me to bake her famous apple pie, sharing stories of her youth, and showing me what unconditional love felt like. I had always dreamed of being that kind of grandmother myself someday, a soft place to land, a keeper of family traditions, a source of wisdom and comfort. When grandmother Beatrice passed away, she left me a significant inheritance: her house in Boston, some family heirlooms, and a substantial investment portfolio that my grandfather had carefully built. My parents had also been prudent savers, and when they passed within 2 years of each other shortly after Frank's death, I found myself financially secure but emotionally bereft of the family connections I treasured. All these losses reinforced my determination to maintain a close relationship with Amanda. She was my only child, my remaining immediate family. I dreamed of the day she might have children of her own, giving me the opportunity to be the kind of grandmother to them that Beatrice had been to me. I imagined holiday gatherings in my home, teaching my grandchildren family recipes, sharing our family stories and traditions. Little did I know how painfully different reality would be from these cherished dreams. After the difficult years following Frank's death, Amanda seemed to find her footing in college. She chose to attend Northwestern University, far from Boston and me, but I supported her decision. Distance might be good for her, I thought. She was studying marketing and communications, excelling academically in a way she hadn't since before her father died. During those 4 years, our relationship settled into a new rhythm. She called occasionally, came home for major holidays, and gradually the angry outbursts decreased. I visited her on campus twice a year, always making sure to bring care packages and take her and her friends out for nice dinners. I wanted to be involved in her life without suffocating her newfound independence. During her junior year, she mentioned a young man named Brian Harrington, who was in several of her classes. By senior year, they were dating seriously. The first time Amanda brought Brian home during Christmas break, I was cautiously optimistic. He was handsome, well-spoken, and seemed to genuinely care for my daughter. He came from a wealthy Connecticut family. His father owned a successful investment firm where Brian planned to work after graduation. I noticed how Amanda seemed different around him, more polished somehow, more conscious of appearances. Brian's family has a summer house in Martha's Vineyard, she told me excitedly. They've invited me to spend 2 weeks there next summer. I was happy for her, but couldn't help feeling a small pang of worry. The Harringtons lived in a world very different from ours. We had always been comfortable but modest, valuing education, hard work, and compassion over material wealth and social status. After graduation, Amanda moved to New York to be near Brian. She landed an entry-level position at a marketing firm while he began working for his father's company. I helped her move into her tiny apartment, spending a week helping her settle in and explore her new neighborhood. During that visit, I began noticing subtle changes in her attitude toward me. "Mom, you really should update your wardrobe," she commented while we were having coffee one morning. "Those shoes are so outdated." Later that week, when I suggested a family recipe for an affordable dinner, "I don't eat that kind of food anymore." Brian's mother introduced me to this amazing organic meal delivery service. These small comments stung, but I brushed them aside. She was young, establishing her identity, finding her way in a new social circle. It was natural for her to differentiate herself from her upbringing. Over the next few years, those small comments grew more frequent and more cutting. Amanda was rising quickly in her career, moving to progressively more prestigious firms. Brian proposed with a diamond ring that must have cost more than my car. They bought a luxury condo in an exclusive neighborhood, and suddenly my comfortable home in Boston wasn't nice enough for her to visit for more than a day or two. "Why don't you get rid of all these old things?" she asked during one visit, gesturing around my living room at the furniture Frank and I had chosen together, the family photos, the mementos from my parents and grandmother. "This place looks like a time capsule from the 80s. What Amanda failed to understand was that these old things were my connections to the people I had loved and lost. Each item held memories, stories, pieces of my heart. Brian's parents, Margaret and William Harrington, were always politely distant with me. At the engagement dinner they hosted at an exclusive restaurant, Margaret looked me up and down when I arrived and said, "Oh, Florence, how nice you made an effort to dress for the occasion." The comment, delivered with a tight smile, made it clear that my best dress wasn't quite good enough for their standards. As the wedding approached, Amanda consulted me less and less. The Harringtons were paying for most of it, which apparently gave them decision-making authority. The intimate personal wedding I had imagined for my only daughter became a lavish society event with 300 guests, most of whom I had never met. I was seated at a table far from the wedding party alongside distant relatives of the Harringtons. "It's just how the seating worked out, Mom," Amanda explained dismissively when I expressed hurt. After the wedding, Amanda and Brian traveled through Europe for a month, then settled into their busy lives in New York. Our phone calls became less frequent. My invitations for visits often declined. When they did visit Boston, they usually stayed in a hotel rather than with me, citing my lack of a guest room, though the room that had been Amanda's was always ready for her. I continued working as a nurse, finding joy in my patients and colleagues when family connections seemed increasingly elusive. I joined community groups, volunteered, built a rich life of friendships and service. But there was always that hollow space in my heart where I longed for a closer relationship with my only child. Then came the phone call that changed everything. "Mom," Amanda said, her voice unusually bright, "I have some news. Brian and I are expecting a baby." My heart soared. A grandchild. Perhaps this new life would bring us closer, heal the growing distance between us. I immediately offered to help in any way they needed to come stay with them after the birth, to help prepare the nursery, anything at all. "That's not necessary," Amanda replied coolly. "Brian's mother is already planning everything. She's done this before with Brian's sister's kids." Despite this initial rebuff, I began preparing for my grandchild's arrival with enthusiasm. I transformed my home office into a nursery complete with a crib that converted to a toddler bed, a comfortable rocking chair, and bookshelves filled with children's classics. I wanted to be ready for visits, to create a special place where my grandchild would feel welcome and loved. I also started knitting baby blankets, sewing tiny clothes, collecting thoughtful items for a gift basket. I researched the latest in infant care, wanting to update my knowledge from my nursing days. I was determined to be a supportive, helpful grandmother, not intrusive, but available and prepared. Looking back, I can see that these hopeful preparations were the first sign of the heartbreak to come. Amanda's pregnancy should have brought us closer, but instead it revealed how deep the chasm between us had grown. Amanda's pregnancy progressed, and with each passing month, I found myself increasingly sidelined. When I called to ask about doctor appointments, hoping I might accompany her to one, she always had an excuse. "Mom, these appointments are so quick and boring. There's no point in you coming all the way from Boston." Later, I learned from a mutual friend that Margaret Harrington had attended several appointments, including the ultrasound where they learned the baby was a boy. I had to hear about my grandson's gender secondhand from someone who wasn't even family. I tried to hide my hurt, focusing instead on the joy of having a grandson on the way. I sent thoughtful care packages, ginger candies for morning sickness, luxurious body butter for stretching skin, books about motherhood that had comforted me during my own pregnancy. Amanda's thank you texts were brief and perfunctory. When I asked about the baby shower, Amanda informed me that Margaret was handling everything. "It's at the country club, Mom, just a small gathering of close friends and family." I received an invitation 2 weeks before the event, clearly an afterthought. The small gathering turned out to be 50 people, mostly Brian's family and the couple's New York social circle. I knew hardly anyone there. Margaret introduced me to her friends as Amanda's mother, the nurse, with a tone that somehow made my profession sound quaint and provincial rather than the calling I had devoted my life to. At the shower, I presented Amanda with a handmade quilt I had spent months creating, incorporating fabrics from family heirlooms, a piece of Frank's favorite shirt, a square from my wedding dress, a patch from the blanket my grandmother had made for Amanda when she was born. "Oh," Amanda said, barely glancing at it before setting it aside for one of Margaret's friends to fold away with the other gifts. "That's very homemade." The comment sliced through me. The quilt represented generations of our family, a tangible connection between this new baby and his heritage. But to Amanda, it wasn't as impressive as the high-tech baby monitor or designer nursery decor that other guests had brought. Throughout the shower, I sat quietly at my assigned table, watching as Amanda glowed under Margaret's attentive direction. My daughter looked beautiful, her belly round with my grandson, but she felt further from me than ever. I wondered if she remembered how I had held her hair back during her own difficult entry into the world, how I had sung to her every night, how deeply and completely she had been loved from her very first breath. As the due date approached, I cleared my schedule entirely for the 2 weeks before and after, wanting to be available whenever Amanda might need me. I stocked my freezer with homemade meals that could be easily transported to New York. I researched the best newborn photographers in their area, thinking it might be a helpful suggestion. Then one Tuesday evening in April, my phone rang. It was Brian, his voice formal and detached. "Florence, Amanda wanted me to let you know that Jackson Frank Harrington was born this afternoon. 7 pounds, 8 ounces. Mother and baby are doing well." I sat down, my knees suddenly weak. My grandson had been born, and I hadn't even known Amanda was in labor. Jackson Frank, they had given him Frank's name as a middle name. That small acknowledgement of my late husband brought tears to my eyes. "That's wonderful news. I can be there first thing tomorrow morning," I said, already mentally packing my bags. "Actually," Brian replied, "Amanda would prefer if you wait about a week. Her mother is staying with us to help, and the apartment will be quite full. We'll let you know when would be a good time to visit." 1 week. I had to wait 1 full week to meet my only grandchild while Margaret Harrington was already there helping, bonding, establishing herself as the primary grandmother. I swallowed my hurt and agreed, not wanting to start any conflict that might further delay my meeting Jackson. That week was one of the longest of my life. I busied myself with final preparations, washing and organizing all the baby clothes I had purchased, assembling a care package of postpartum essentials for Amanda, carefully selecting items that reflected both my nursing knowledge and maternal experience. I picked out a special gift for Jackson, a sterling silver rattle that had been my grandfather's, then Frank's, then Amanda's. It had been in our family for generations. I had it professionally cleaned and secured in a beautiful box with a note about its history. Finally, Amanda texted that I could visit that Saturday. I drove the 4 hours to New York with my car filled with gifts and supplies, my heart racing with anticipation. Despite all the disappointments leading up to this moment, I was about to meet my grandson. Nothing could diminish the joy of that. I arrived at their building precisely at the agreed-upon time, my arms loaded with carefully selected presents. The doorman helped me bring everything up to their penthouse apartment. I took a deep breath before knocking, telling myself to focus only on the positive. This was a new beginning, a chance to rebuild my relationship with Amanda through this precious new life. Brian opened the door, his expression neutral. "Florence, come in. Amanda's in the living room with Jackson and her parents." Her parents, not just Margaret, but William too. So both of Brian's parents were welcome from day one while I had been kept away for a week. I pushed down the fresh hurt and plastered on a smile, determined to make this visit a positive one. The scene in the living room confirmed my outsider status. Amanda sat on the sofa with the baby in her arms, Margaret perched beside her, cooing at Jackson. William stood nearby, looking every bit the proud grandfather. They had formed a family tableau, and I was arriving as an interloper. "Mom," Amanda acknowledged without getting up. "You made it." I approached slowly, setting down my bags of gifts. "I did. Thank you for inviting me. How are you feeling?" "Fine," she replied shortly. "The delivery was straightforward. Mother has been a tremendous help." Margaret smiled smugly at this, adjusting the blanket around Jackson with practiced ease. "It all comes back to you, doesn't it? Like riding a bicycle?" I nodded politely, my eyes fixed on the tiny bundle in Amanda's arms. From where I stood, I could just see a tuft of dark hair and a perfectly round cheek. My grandson. Frank's grandson. My heart swelled with a love so immediate and complete it took my breath away. "May I hold him?" I asked softly, already reaching out my arms. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees in an instant. "Don't touch my baby, you are disgusting." Amanda's words exploded in the quiet room, shocking everyone into silence. Her face contorted with a rage I had never seen before. She clutched Jackson tighter to her chest and physically recoiled from me. I froze, my outstretched hands suspended in midair, unable to process what I had just heard. Surely I had misunderstood. "Amanda," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "You heard me," she hissed. "I saw you come in here without even washing your hands. You worked in a hospital with sick people for decades. Do you have any idea what kinds of germs you carry? You could make him sick." The accusation was so absurd, so deeply insulting to someone who had spent her entire career protecting children's health that I couldn't immediately form a response. Of course, I had washed my hands in the lobby restroom before coming up using the hospital-grade hand sanitizer I always carried in my purse. Basic hygiene had been ingrained in me through 4 decades of nursing. "Amanda, And your clothes," she continued, her voice rising. "That sweater probably hasn't been washed in weeks. It's covered in who knows what. You cannot touch Jackson until you've showered and changed into clean clothes that I provide." Margaret placed a restraining hand on Amanda's arm, not to defend me, but apparently concerned about her daughter-in-law's rising blood pressure. "Amanda, dear, remember what Dr. Stevens said about staying calm." Brian shifted uncomfortably but said nothing in my defense. William cleared his throat and suddenly became very interested in his phone. I stood there, publicly humiliated in front of my daughter's in-laws, accused of being a health risk to my own grandson. The room seemed to tilt slightly, my ears buzzing with shock. "I assure you, I am perfectly clean." I finally managed, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I would never do anything to endanger Jackson." "You don't get to decide that," Amanda snapped. "I'm his mother. I decide who holds him and when. And right now, I don't want your germs anywhere near him." The cruelty of her words delivered in front of an audience cut deeper than any physical pain I had ever experienced. This wasn't just about hygiene. This was Amanda deliberately putting me in my place, establishing dominance, perhaps even punishing me for some perceived failing I couldn't identify. "I understand," I said quietly, though I didn't understand at all. I picked up my purse, leaving the bags of gifts where they stood. Perhaps I should come back another time. That would be best, Amanda replied coldly. As I turned to leave, Margaret spoke up. Florence, don't forget your things. She gestured to the gifts with a dismissive wave. They're for Jackson and Amanda, I replied. Whether I'm welcome or not, they are. The drive back to Boston was a blur. I don't remember stopping for gas or navigating the familiar highways. I only remember the crushing weight in my chest, the burning behind my eyes, and Amanda's words playing on an endless loop in my mind. Don't touch my baby, you are disgusting. Decades of loving her, sacrificing for her, supporting her, all erased by those cruel words. The nursing career I had built helping thousands of children, the expertise I had developed, the respect I had earned, all dismissed as somehow dangerous and dirty. I arrived home after dark, walking into my silent house with its freshly prepared nursery that might never be used. The sight of the crib, the tiny clothes folded and waiting the books I had hoped to read to Jackson, it all unleashed the tears I had managed to hold back during the drive. I cried until there were no tears left, until my throat was raw and my eyes swollen. I cried for the grandmother I wouldn't be allowed to be, for the relationship with my daughter that seemed irreparably broken, and for little Jackson, who would grow up not knowing how much I loved him from the very first moment. That night, lying awake in the darkness, I replayed every interaction with Amanda over the past few years, searching for where things had gone so wrong. Had I been too critical, not supportive enough, too intrusive, too distant? I couldn't find the answers, only the painful evidence that somehow, in my daughter's eyes, I had become someone unworthy of even touching her child. Dawn was breaking when I finally drifted into a fitful sleep, emotionally exhausted but no closer to understanding the chasm that had opened between Amanda and me, a chasm now made unbridgeable by her public humiliation of me. In the days following that devastating visit, I moved through my home like a ghost, alternating between numbing shock and waves of grief so intense they left me gasping. I called in sick to my volunteer shifts at the community center, unable to face kindly asking about my new grandson. How could I possibly explain what had happened? After 3 days of isolation, I finally answered a call from my dear friend Sarah, who had been checking on me persistently. Florence, I'm coming over right now with dinner and you're going to tell me everything, she insisted. True to her word, she arrived an hour later with comfort food and a compassionate ear. I poured out the whole painful story, including every humiliating detail. Sarah listened without interruption, her expression shifting from shock to outrage to deep concern. Florence, this isn't normal, she said finally. This goes beyond new mother anxiety or family tension. Amanda's behavior was deliberately cruel. But why? I asked the question that had been haunting me. What did I do to deserve this? Sarah took my hands in hers. Sometimes it's not about what you did. It's about what's happening inside the other person. Have you heard of grandparent alienation? It's becoming increasingly common. At her suggestion, I began researching the phenomenon. I joined online support groups for estranged grandparents and was shocked to discover how many others were experiencing similar pain. I wasn't alone. Some grandparents had been cut off for years, never meeting their grandchildren at all. Others were permitted only strictly controlled contact, always feeling like they were walking on eggshells. In one particularly helpful group, I connected with other healthcare professionals who had been accused of being contaminated or dangerous around their grandchildren despite their medical knowledge. The pattern was disturbingly familiar. Meanwhile, I tried reaching out to Amanda. I sent gentle text messages expressing my love for her and Jackson, offering to respect whatever boundaries she needed while still maintaining some connection. The responses, when they came at all, were terse and cold. We're very busy right now. Jackson is on a strict schedule. Maybe in a few weeks. After 2 weeks with no meaningful communication, I finally wrote her an email pouring my heart out about how much I loved them both and how deeply her words had hurt me. I asked for a chance to understand what was really going on and how we might repair our relationship. Her reply came 3 days later. Mom, I think you are overreacting. I was just protecting my newborn from potential illness, which any good mother would do. If you can't respect my parenting decisions without making everything about your feelings, then perhaps we need some space. Jackson is doing wonderfully, by the way. Mother has been staying with us 3 days a week and has been an invaluable help. The reference to Margaret as the helpful, welcome grandmother while I was kept at arm's length was clearly deliberate. I was being replaced, methodically excluded from my grandson's life. On the advice of my support group, I consulted a family therapist, Dr. Patricia Miller. After several sessions discussing the situation, she offered her professional perspective. "What you're experiencing sounds like a combination of factors," she explained. "There may be unresolved issues from Amanda's adolescence after losing her father. The influence of her in-laws seems significant. They may be encouraging this division consciously or unconsciously. And sometimes new parents, especially those with perfectionist tendencies like you've described in Amanda, can develop almost irrational fears about their baby's well-being." "Is there anything I can do?" I asked desperately. "Continue reaching out with love but respect her boundaries," Dr. Miller advised. "Document your attempts at contact. In some states, grandparents have legal rights to visitation, especially in cases where there's been an established relationship or where one parent is deceased, as Frank is." I researched grandparents' rights laws in my state, but was hesitant to pursue legal action. The thought of dragging my family through court proceedings felt wrong, like it would only cement the adversarial relationship that had developed. Instead, I tried to establish some minimal contact. After 6 weeks, Amanda finally agreed to a brief visit with conditions. I could see Jackson for 1 hour. I must shower immediately before arriving, wear freshly laundered clothes, and use hand sanitizer before approaching him. I could not kiss him or hold him without permission. These rules, clearly designed to reinforce my status as a potential contaminant rather than a loving grandmother, were humiliating. But I accepted them for the chance to see my grandson. The visit was tense and artificial. Amanda watched my every move like a hawk. When Jackson began to fuss in my arms, she immediately took him back, saying he can sense when people are nervous around him. Over the next several months, these restrictive visits became our pattern. I was permitted to see Jackson approximately once a month, always under Amanda's suspicious supervision, always with the unspoken threat that any perceived misstep would end my access completely. Meanwhile, through mutual friends and social media, I learned that Brian's parents had unrestricted access. They babysat, regularly took Jackson for overnight stays at their Connecticut home, and were featured prominently in family photos that Amanda posted online. Then came the social media post that nearly broke me. Amanda had shared photos of Jackson's first Christmas, featuring a 4-generation picture with Margaret, her mother, and her grandmother, all holding Jackson. The caption read, "4 generations of strong women, so blessed to have all this maternal wisdom to guide me through motherhood." 4 generations of maternal wisdom deliberately excluding me, Jackson's only living maternal grandmother. The message couldn't have been clearer. I was not considered part of their family legacy. Adding insult to injury, I discovered through community connections that Amanda had been spreading concerning misinformation about me. A former nursing colleague mentioned that she had heard from a mutual acquaintance that I was struggling with mental health issues and had become unstable since retirement. These were absolute fabrications, apparently designed to justify Amanda's restrictions on my relationship with Jackson. The realization that my daughter was actively damaging my reputation to support her narrative was the final straw. That night, sitting alone in my home with the weight of months of rejection and humiliation pressing down on me, I made a decision that would change everything. The decision didn't come easily or quickly. For weeks after discovering Amanda's lies about my mental state, I wrestled with confusion, hurt, and yes, anger. Emotions I had been suppressing in hopes of reconciliation finally surfaced. I had spent my life putting others first, my patients, my husband, my daughter. Perhaps it was finally time to stand up for myself. I began by educating myself about toxic family relationships. I read books with titles like When to Walk Away and Boundaries with Adult Children. I attended workshops on family estrangement and healing from emotional abuse. Each resource confirmed what I had been reluctant to admit. The relationship with Amanda had become harmful to my well-being. In therapy, Dr. Miller helped me work through my feelings without judgment. "Florence, you've spent months trying to understand what you might have done wrong, how you might fix this. But relationships require effort from both parties. Amanda isn't meeting you halfway. She's not even trying to understand your perspective." "But she's my only child," I protested, tears welling up. "And Jackson is my only grandchild." "That makes this incredibly painful," she acknowledged, "but it doesn't mean you should accept mistreatment. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and others is to establish clear consequences for harmful behavior." After much reflection, I made an appointment with Thomas Reynolds, the lawyer who had handled my parents' estate and my own will. I explained the situation honestly, including my concerns about Jackson's future. I want to be fair, I told him, but I also need to protect myself and what I've worked for. Thomas nodded understandingly. Many clients face similar situations, Florence. Your estate is yours to distribute as you see fit. Let's discuss your options. We spent several hours reviewing my assets, the house in Boston that had been my parents' now worth considerably more than when I inherited it, the investment portfolio my grandmother had left me, which had grown significantly, my retirement accounts and life insurance policy. All told, it was a substantial estate, not wealthy by Harrington standards perhaps, but comfortable security that could make a real difference in someone's life. Currently, Amanda is your primary beneficiary, Thomas confirmed, but we can restructure this in several ways. We discussed various approaches. I could disinherit Amanda completely, but that felt too harsh and final. I could establish trusts with specific conditions. I could redirect assets to charities that reflected my values. After careful consideration, I decided on a three-pronged approach. First, I would establish a charitable foundation in Frank's name dedicated to supporting children with heart conditions, a cause that would honor his memory and my nursing career. Second, I would create a trust for Jackson that would activate when he turned 25, structured, so that neither Amanda nor Brian could access or control the funds. Finally, I would leave a small symbolic inheritance to Amanda, enough to make it clear that the restructuring was a deliberate choice, not an oversight. Are you sure about this? Thomas asked as we finalized the documents. These changes are significant. I'm sure, I replied, feeling strangely calm. For too long, I've been trying to earn Amanda's love and respect by accepting whatever scraps of attention she offered. It's time I valued myself enough to say, that's not acceptable. The process took several weeks. When everything was legally established, I faced the question of whether to inform Amanda. Thomas advised against it legally. I had no obligation to disclose changes to my will during my lifetime. But keeping silent felt dishonest, like I was setting a trap that would only spring after I was gone. That wasn't my intention. This wasn't about punishment. It was about boundaries. And boundaries are only meaningful when they're clearly communicated. I wrote Amanda a letter, careful to keep my tone factual and non-accusatory. Dear Amanda, I'm writing to inform you of changes I've made to my estate plan. After much reflection, I've decided to restructure my will in ways that better reflect my values and wishes. The majority of my estate will now fund the Frank Wilson Foundation for Pediatric Cardiac Care. A trust has been established for Jackson's education and future needs, which will become accessible to him at age 25. You will receive a small inheritance as well. This decision wasn't made lightly or in haste. It reflects months of painful experiences and my realization that our current relationship dynamic isn't healthy for either of us. I will always love you and Jackson. My door remains open should you wish to work toward a more respectful and balanced relationship. Mom. I sent the letter by certified mail, ensuring Amanda would receive it personally. 3 days later, my phone exploded with calls and text messages from her. I let them go to voicemail, needing time to prepare myself emotionally before engaging. The messages ranged from incredulous to furious. Is this some kind of joke? After everything we've done for you, how dare you punish me like this? You're going to regret this, Mom. The one message that was notably absent any acknowledgement of how her behavior might have contributed to my decision, any expression of desire to understand my perspective or repair our relationship. When I finally answered her call, Amanda launched immediately into accusations. You're blackmailing me, using your money to try to force me to let you see Jackson more. This is elder financial abuse. I waited until she paused for breath. Amanda, this isn't blackmail. There are no conditions in my letter about seeing Jackson. This is simply me making choices about my own assets based on how I've been treated. How you've been treated, she sputtered. You're the one who's been difficult. You've never respected my parenting decisions. I've accepted every restriction you've placed on my relationship with Jackson, I said quietly. I've been called disgusting, been told I'm a health risk, been given a list of rules for brief supervised visits, while Brian's parents have unlimited access. I've discovered you've been telling people I'm mentally unstable. These aren't parenting decisions. Amanda, this is hurtful behavior. There was a long silence. Then in a voice dripping with contempt, So this is revenge. No, I replied, surprised at how steady my voice remained. This is self-respect. For years, I've allowed myself to be treated as if my feelings don't matter, as if I'm lucky to receive whatever scraps of attention you're willing to give. That ends now. Amanda's tone shifted abruptly, becoming wheedling. Mom, you know things have been stressful with a new baby. If you're feeling neglected, we can work something out. There's no need for drastic measures like changing your will. The sudden pivot to manipulation was so transparent, it was almost sad. She wasn't concerned about our relationship, she was concerned about her inheritance. I'm open to working things out, I said truthfully, but not because of money. If you want a healthier relationship, it should be because we're family and we love each other. Fine, she snapped, the pretense of conciliation evaporating instantly. Keep your money, we don't need it anyway. Brian makes more than enough to give Jackson everything he needs. I'm glad to hear that, I replied. It means that if we rebuild our relationship, it will be based on genuine connection, not financial expectations. She hung up without another word. The aftermath of that conversation was both painful and liberating. Amanda cut off contact completely for several weeks. No texts, no updates about Jackson, no response to my occasional gentle outreach. I grieved the loss deeply, but continued working on my own healing through therapy support groups and strengthening my other relationships. I had made my stand, drawn my boundary. Now I needed to find a way forward with or without my daughter's participation in my life. The silence from Amanda stretched from weeks into months. Summer turned to fall, and I found myself facing the prospect of a holiday season without family. Though the pain of estrangement remained acute, I began finding new rhythms in my life, new sources of joy and purpose. I threw myself into establishing the Frank Wilson Foundation, working with medical professionals and nonprofit experts to create something meaningful. The process of honoring Frank's memory while helping children with heart conditions gave me a sense of legacy beyond my personal family connections. I deepened my community involvement, volunteering more regularly at a local family shelter where my nursing background proved invaluable. Working with mothers and children in crisis offered perspective on my own situation while allowing me to continue nurturing others. My friendship circle expanded as I became more open about my experiences. Rather than hiding my pain behind a facade of everything being fine, I began sharing my journey with trusted friends. To my surprise, many had their own stories of family estrangement or difficult adult children. These conversations reduced my isolation and shame. Sarah remained my steadfast supporter, checking in regularly and including me in her family gatherings. "You're my chosen family," she insisted, "and that's just as important as biological ties." I also began working with a grief counselor who specialized in ambiguous loss, the particular pain of losing someone who is still alive but absent from your life. She helped me understand that my feelings of loss were valid even though Amanda hadn't died but had chosen distance. "You're mourning the relationship you hoped for, the grandmother role you expected to have," she explained. "That grief deserves acknowledgement and time." As Thanksgiving approached, I decided to host a chosen family dinner, inviting friends who might otherwise be alone for the holiday. The preparation gave me purpose, and the evening itself was filled with warmth and genuine connection. Though thoughts of Amanda and Jackson were never far from my mind, I found myself genuinely enjoying the new tradition. Then, in early December, nearly 4 months after my letter about the will, I received a text from Amanda. "Mom, I think we should talk. Can I come by your house this weekend?" My heart raced as I read the message several times. Was this an olive branch, a confrontation? Another attempt to change my mind about the inheritance? I consulted with Dr. Miller before responding. "Go into the conversation with clear boundaries but an open heart," she advised. "Listen more than you speak initially. Try to understand what's motivating this outreach." I agreed to Amanda's visit, spending the days before in a state of nervous anticipation. I prepared her favorite cookies, tidied the house, and tried to center myself emotionally. When she arrived on Saturday afternoon, I was struck by how tired she looked. The polished appearance she typically maintained had slipped, revealing dark circles under her eyes and tension in her face. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "Can I get you coffee?" "Tea would be nice," she replied, her voice subdued. We sat in the living room, the same space where I had cried so many tears over our estrangement. An awkward silence stretched between us until Amanda finally spoke. "I've been doing some thinking. She began staring into her teacup rather than meeting my eyes. And some therapy, actually. This admission surprised me. Amanda had always been dismissive of therapy, considering it a sign of weakness. My therapist suggested that some of my intensity about Jackson might be related to losing dad when I was a teenager, that I'm trying to control everything to prevent any harm coming to people I love. It was the most insightful thing I had heard her say in years. I nodded encouragingly but remained silent, following Dr. Miller's advice to listen first. She also pointed out that I might have some unresolved anger toward you from that time. That maybe I blamed you for not somehow preventing Dad's death, even though that's irrational. She glanced up briefly. I never thought of it that way before. I understand, I said softly. Grief can express itself in complicated ways, especially for adolescents. Amanda nodded. The thing is, Mom, I don't want Jackson to grow up without knowing you. Whatever issues are between us, you're his only grandmother on my side. And you were a good mom, even if I haven't always appreciated that. Tears welled in my eyes at this unexpected acknowledgement. There's something else, she continued, looking uncomfortable. Brian's parents, they're not as helpful as I made them out to be. Margaret is actually quite controlling and critical when you're not around. She's constantly second-guessing my parenting decisions and comparing Jackson to Brian's sister's children. This revelation didn't particularly surprise me given what I had observed of Margaret's personality, but I was touched that Amanda was being honest about it. I'm not saying everything will be perfect overnight, Amanda added hastily. I still have concerns and boundaries, but I'd like to try to rebuild things between us slowly. For Jackson's sake and for mine too, I guess. I took a deep breath, managing my surge of hope with cautious optimism. I would like that very much, and I'm willing to respect your boundaries as Jackson's mother. All I've ever wanted is to be treated with basic respect and allowed to have a relationship with my grandson. Amanda nodded, then asked hesitantly, and the will, is that still? There it was, the financial motivation I had suspected might be behind this reconciliation attempt. The changes I made were not impulsive, Amanda. They reflect a lot of thought about my legacy and values. The foundation honors your father. The trust ensures Jackson's future. I'm not planning to reverse those decisions. Her face fell slightly, but she rallied. I understand. This isn't about money anyway. I'm glad to hear you say that, I replied. Because a relationship built on financial expectations isn't healthy for either of us. We talked for another hour, tentatively establishing a new framework for moving forward. Amanda agreed to regular visits with Jackson, starting with shorter ones and potentially building to longer stays as he grew. I reaffirmed my commitment to respecting her role as his mother, while asking that she respect my experience and intentions as his grandmother. When she left, I felt cautiously hopeful. This wasn't a complete resolution. There were still wounds to heal, trust to rebuild. But it was a beginning. Over the next few months, our relationship slowly improved. The visits with Jackson became more relaxed, less supervised. Amanda began calling occasionally just to chat, something she hadn't done in years. We had difficult conversations about our past hurts, facilitated sometimes by a family therapist we both agreed to see. I maintained the changes to my will, not as a punishment, but as a reflection of my values. The foundation was doing important work, and the trust would ensure Jackson had opportunities regardless of what happened between his parents and me. Amanda gradually seemed to accept this, perhaps recognizing that our relationship was worth more than an inheritance. By the time Jackson turned 1, I was a regular presence in his life. He knew me, reached for me, delighted in the songs and games I shared with him. The nursery I had prepared in my home finally welcomed its intended guest for occasional overnight stays. The journey from that devastating moment when Amanda had called me disgusting to this new, more balanced relationship hadn't been easy. It had required me to value myself enough to set boundaries, to acknowledge my own worth, even when my only child couldn't see it. It had meant risking permanent estrangement by standing firm rather than capitulating to emotional manipulation. Through this painful process, I discovered strength I didn't know I possessed, and wisdom I wish I had embraced sooner. I learned that love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, that family relationships must be based on mutual respect to be healthy. Most importantly, I learned that while I couldn't control Amanda's choices or behavior, I could control my response to them. Today, as I watch my grandson playing in the garden building towers with blocks that once belonged to his mother, I feel profound gratitude for this second chance at family connection. Our relationship isn't perfect. Amanda and I still have moments of tension, old patterns that resurface, but it's authentic in a way it never was before. My journey through estrangement and reconciliation taught me that sometimes the path to healing a broken relationship begins with healing yourself. By finding the courage to say, "This treatment is not acceptable," and the strength to back those words with action, I ultimately created the possibility for something healthier to grow from the ashes of what was lost. True wealth, I've come to understand, isn't measured in the assets we accumulate or pass down. It's found in relationships built on genuine respect and affection, in the courage to stand up for our own worth, and in the wisdom to recognize when to hold firm and when to extend grace. If you're facing family estrangement, please know you're not alone. Your worth isn't diminished by another's inability to see it. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to establish boundaries that protect your dignity and well-being. I'd love to hear about your experiences with family relationships, the challenges, the triumphs, the lessons learned. Please share your story in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, consider subscribing and sharing with others who might find comfort in knowing they're not alone. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, it's never too late to claim your own value and stand in your truth.